All right. I'm Lucy Hayes.
Evan Griffiths.
Kelly Fields.
And I'm Jack Malone, and our presentation is on permafrost loss and its impact on climate change. Next slide. First, we have to understand what is permafrost. Permafrost is ground that has been at or below 0 degrees Celsius for 2 or more consecutive years. It currently makes up 24% of the ground in the northern hemisphere. Permafrost is made up of mostly rocks and sand held together by ice on the top layer, and it usually contains large amounts of organic matter in the lower layers, mostly roots and animal matter from the last ice age. Permafrost can be from 1 meter thick to thousands of meters deep, and it has recently started melting due to increased temperature worldwide. We can see that in the image on the right, where there's some permafrost separated from the mainland in Alaska after the temperatures have risen there and it has melted off of the main chunk of land. Next slide. Next, we have to know why permafrost is important. Permafrost is important because it is the largest reservoir of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases in the world. The National Snow and Ice Data Center estimates that there are about 1,400 gigatons of carbon frozen in permafrost, and compared to their estimate that there are 850 gigatons of carbon currently in the Earth's atmosphere, there's the potential to more than double the amount of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere if permafrost continues melting. Another reason permafrost is important because hundreds of thousands of people in Alaska, Canada, or Russia live directly on permafrost, whether that be their house is built on it or the city they live on in its entirety is built on permafrost. Next slide.
So there are numerous impacts that permafrost has, including on the environment. One of the main ways that permafrost loss affects the environment is through vegetation. This figure on the right shows how vegetation in remote Sweden has been affected by permafrost loss from between 1970 and 2000. This shows that wet and semi-wet vegetation has become more abundant as a result of the permafrost melting and making the ground more wet. Permafrost loss has also resulted in a 22 to 66% increase in methane emissions between that same time span, and this is important because methane is a very potent greenhouse gas. Next slide. These photographs on the right also show some of the other effects of permafrost loss that it has on wildlife. So they showed the rough-legged hawks and how they lose their habitat as a result of permafrost loss due to erosion, which wipes out their nests, which are mostly on the edge of cliffs. They are not the only species affected by permafrost loss, but this is just one example. Next slide.
Yeah, so for the impacts on society, in Canada's Northwestern Territories, the estimated cost of permafrost thaw is 1.3 billion over 75 years. So most of this cost is from the land becoming unstable because the ice melts, and so the crystalline structure isn't there anymore, and therefore the property is damaged, as you can see in this image on the right. And in Canada, this issue disproportionately affects the Inuit people. So compared to others, they have low income, and if they were forced to move to areas with higher cost of living, that would be a very bad thing. In addition, permafrost loss and damage on their communities would damage their cultural lands, and they would lose their way of life there. On top of damaging homes and structures in the Arctic, the permafrost loss is also predicted to damage important oil and natural gas infrastructure. So roughly 3,600 kilometers of oil and gas pipelines will be affected. So as you can see in this image here, the red is the hotspots of damage, and those black lines are where the oil and natural gas infrastructure is. So the world relies on these oil and gas pipelines in the far north, and if they were to be damaged, it would cause a shortage in energy supply. So for example, in the Yamal and Nets region in northwestern Siberia, it's very important because it accounts for more than 1/3 of the EU's pipeline imports. And also pipe leakage could affect fishing and hunting in the environment.
Hi guys. So as far as the economic impacts of permafrost go, there are a lot of costs that are both pretty obviously caused and some that are not so obvious. So to cover the more obvious costs, we can look to examples shown in the pictures on the right, where we see a lot of the physical damage that is inflicted by the thawing permafrost. First, we can see an apartment building in Siberia that has just been like completely destroyed. And then below that, we see a road in Alaska that has just been ripped apart by this permafrost thawing. So obviously, somebody has to fix all this damage that's being caused. And in some cases, the local or national government will take action and pay for repairs, keeping in mind that this could increase taxes. But in other cases, the cost of repairs fall directly upon individuals, and that can be really tough to manage depending on the severity of the damage. Next slide. And as far as the less direct economic impacts go, this thawing permafrost is contributing to an increased amount of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere because as the permafrost melts, large amounts of CO2 and methane are being released. This in turn is contributing to the greenhouse effect, which is in turn contributing to global warming. So now we all know that global warming has huge economic impacts from anything dealing with coastal damage costs to needing to find new energy sources that won't be as damaging. Next slide. And in conclusion, thawing permafrost is really a big issue because it has a massive contribution to increased levels of greenhouse gases, which in turn contributes to global warming. And it really causes this ugly cycle because if melting permafrost is caused by increased temperatures and it is also causing these increased temperatures, then we're really stuck in this downward spiral. And in addition, permafrost is also contributing to a number of environmental, societal, and economic impacts from anywhere from changes in the levels of vegetation to damage relating to oil access. So in all, this is an issue expanding far beyond the scope of just where permafrost is located and definitely an issue that we need to look more into.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to our presentation. And here's our sources.